would be abundant with the variety and be advantageous to holding an atmosphere and things like that, because we have a lot of the constituents for life.
We were talking the other night on the League of Extraordinary Inventors about water and how you get hydrogen. And I never thought in any way it was hard to get the hydrogen. Okay. It's a real simple process. You just have to break it from the water. I think the harder part about it is separating the oxygen so it doesn't reform back into water. Because they say, well, once you use the hydrogen, all of a sudden you get water coming out your tailpipe as a byproduct, right? Which means that hydrogen wants to attack oxygen all the time. So therefore, separating the oxygen is the hardest part of the problem, not creating the hydrogen itself. It's separating the oxygen from the hydrogen. You know what I mean? So
I do.
I saw in Meyer's work where he actually created a magnetic field or something like it to attract the oxygen away from the hydrogen. Therefore, he was able to get more hydrogen. So it seemed. But it always seemed to me that when he resonated each one of those things, and he resonated 6 together, so he's getting a combined resonance between all of them, that was sufficient enough to break enough hydrogen from the oxygen. The only problem you would have is when it wants to reform so fast. That's the biggest problem they have. And it's real simple to solve. You just have to attract the oxygen away from the hydrogen by creating an electrostatic pressure in order to do it.
Well, that's what a hydrogen fuel cell is. See, I think when they were publicizing about it back when it was sort of bigger news before they realized people started figuring it out, it used to be a create hydrogen for immediate use situation. Okay, you weren't storing the hydrogen, which is good. Storing hydrogen is hard, and it's a bad idea, and it doesn't want to stay stable, and it wants to create water being the easiest constituent, but aside from that, it's just so volatile that containing it is a massive problem. And when they started running some vehicles off of hydrogen, and there were more than a few, all of them were running off of bottled gas. Nobody wanted to handle the stuff. And nobody wanted to spend time to sit there and split water and store it and all this stuff. So, case in point was that there was a guy that ran a car off of water under the same exact principle that you're discussing, and they called it a hydrogen fuel cell. But then he, passed away, and so did his idea. And then all of a sudden, a hydrogen fuel cell became a scuba tank. That held hydrogen. It became a Hindenburg that you strap to the back of a bus and hope for the best, nobody wanted to embrace that. It's also like at the pressure levels that they were setting it at, because of how difficult and dangerous it is to store. At the pressure level that they were setting it at, it was 100% efficient as far as clean goes, but what it wasn't was powerful compared to the, energy potential of gas and diesel. You just had better efficiency, more power, more torque out of a gas and diesel engine, because they shut the fuel cell down.
Yeah, I think they should have
worked off of resonance, by the way, right? Worked off of resonance. They weren't. See, people think electrolysis or hydrolysis or whatever, hydrolysis, that they're splitting it with running a current through it, and they're like, oh, and if you hook a 9-volt battery up in the volts, and what? No, it's you have to shake it till it gives up the ghost.
Yeah. it works in a very slow form. I can't even say the word right now. Yes, it works in a very slow form in that way. In resonance, it works in a much faster way, so you get more on demand. So that's how they should have built every hydrogen vehicle that they ever come up with. Forget the cell, build it on demand, and then have a reconstitutor afterward. So
Yeah.
once it explodes, you reconstitute it in water and you continue to run as much as you can. And then eventually you'll have leakage. The problem is it becomes too efficient that way. You have something that runs for like 5 days instead of filling up every day. Now, look, energy companies will always get their money. We'll always go to the gas station, even if it's a water station. I'm never going to disagree with it. That's the way this whole world works. Okay. But for our environment's sake, we need to go to the hydrogen, and we need to do it on demand. And I just think that's the direction we should take as humans to live within our world, not live against it.
Yeah. And I couldn't be more in agreement with you just on all. First of all, I mean, I think what the problem is, okay, is that everything we're talking about, when properly configured, okay, and I say it till I'm blue in the face, it's all the same, Nathan. It's like, so, and the problem is the knife maker. You know what I mean? It's the knife maker. It's the guy that handed the murderer the knife, not the chef. And this stuff used, in its exact way, it's my opinion that it could be just as dangerous as it is helpful when you talk about certain uses. And it's a Pandora's box. And because there's no difference, it has unlimited exploitation. Now, what I believe to be true at this point in our human being history, and I guess we'll see, okay, is I think that this stuff, as far as people in the know are concerned, has just reached such a head that there's no helping hiding it in plain sight anymore necessarily, and I think that's why you're looking at disclosure events. Now I'm not saying that any of it's fake as far as disclosure or anything like that sort of stuff is concerned, but what I am saying is that it's being allowed. That's a big difference.
Yes,
because could have just put one of the people that said it all along up there many, many years ago. Okay, but now they, whoever they are allowing it. Then they doubled down and said, well, you got to give us some information about this. We might pick and choose a little bit as far as to what you might get to know, but there's going to be elements of this that you ought to be privy to.
Yes.
Now, that should probably be a sign when you read the room that, you're going to find out a little bit at a time, okay? And you're probably never going to hear the whole bunch of it, okay? But there's got to be a bigger rhyme to the reason as to why now. Now, it probably, like, if you want to talk about aliens or people from other planets or whatever it may or may not be, whatever it is, okay? There's got to be some reason that they're letting people in on this now, slowly but surely. That has to do with being a part of some kind of bigger thing, like bigger than all of us. So, because what else would the motive be? It's like, well, you can't tell them because they're going to all freak out and you're not going to have a planet left. And that's, it's going to all be over. They must have such a handle on things at this point now that it's like, well, you let them know because we can't move on to the next part of this evolution, if you want to call it that. I don't know what to call it. All I got to say about it is it's not your choice or mine whether or not you get, whether that's the route we're going. It's just going that way,
Well, I think when you have people on YouTube that can actually build these experiments, then it kind of tells you they've already had it for a while. I shouldn't be in the position to bring this out, but because they didn't do it, someone has to do it. And the problem is the answer was so simple. It wasn't a complex answer here. It was a simple get over this part and you've got it. And that's it. And I think now that that's happening, they see that they can't hide it anymore. So they can control the flow of energy coming out, or the flow of information, I should say, coming out. So they just want to make sure it trickles out probably instead of all coming out at once. And I think honestly, we may be going from hydrogen to just straight up floating in the air. You know what I mean? Where some of this stuff becomes irrelevant because the technology is already there to surpass the simple steps we should have taken a long time ago. We should have been in hydrogen back in the 40s, not right now. You know what I mean? We should be on anti-gravity right now and looking at becoming a type 1 civilization. We should be exploring our stars. You know what I mean? And getting on to the next level.
Yeah, I mean, I personally think for planetary purposes that probably, superconductive, transportation is the most it's just simply more earthly than flying through the sky, and but that's here, and if you think beyond the here.
You brought up superconductors, so let me say this. When you create an ether, you're creating a superconductor. Let's just understand this. A superconductor is ice cold and it reacts with magnetic elements, okay? You are creating in an ether situation where the center is ice cold and you are propagating that around the whole thing of a coil. So you are creating a superconductor in itself. Therefore, things change around it, how it interacts with the environment. It's one of the few times that we can look at this stuff now and say, we're actually creating something that we didn't do chemically, that we're doing with other means that should be able to just blow this whole thing up and get a whole other understanding of this whole thing. That's why building the coils the way we are and doing the things we are so vastly important right now to understanding everything. And they know it. They know once you've figured out that barrier, you're not going to be able to hide behind the word superconductor anymore because it's going to lose the big prestige it has.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, right now they treat it like a magic trick, and I mean, obviously the science is known and solid behind it, and as far as what they show you, I mean. Then again, I've never seen anybody doing a superconductor presentation that also had a natural rock that liked to fly like 8 inches into the air, because it was poked. Like, everything's relative. I think that, when you consider the fact that matter in itself is descending from all of the energies that create all of the effects that we're talking about, that it becomes just a simple matter of how to structure that energy in that consolidated form to yield the different results and possibly isolated different results, which could be the big time difference between being able to have the technology and not. And that could very well have also been a big reason for suppression over time is, oh yeah, no question it works. We know how it works, but we simply don't know how to contain it in a way that the desired effect is isolated to that particular effect. It's locked on that effect. And I believe that, following my own logic, and this is on the fly, but I believe it on the fly based on my own logic, that the material science advances, especially with 3D printing, okay, could potentially be the way of creating not only materials but structures, within the, of how the material is built, okay, that's able to isolate particular effects of the ether, and maybe that's it at this point, why it's able to be trickled, because, oh, okay, well, we could give them superconductive capabilities now, which is wildly game changing, no matter what you want to call it, whether it's a buzzword or not. We can give them this capability now, but that Aether access is locked in this crystalline structure in this fashion where it can only be it can only be dispersed to yield this result. And if you try to access it some other kind of way by breaking into the structure and getting into it, because you broke the structure, the effect no longer works and the portal for the Aether closes. Again, on the fly, but this is Joe logic and how my brain works, which is why I wanted to do, I want to get more people into thinking like this. Now, this is not a perfect way of thinking, and it's certainly not the means to an answer, but these are the logical trains of thought that you need to follow in order to realize the greater of what's going on around you, right or wrong, get an idea for it. You hedge your bet. I mean, what I came up with that I presented today, I didn't create that or invent that. And I'm certainly not the first person to say any of these things are ideas. However, what I will say is that these are conclusions I drew on my own and took from no one source. I just got an understanding of all these different things, and then I followed a logical train of thought based on the information that I knew, and this is what I came up with. When I cross-checked it a little bit, because I'd be a fool not to, a little bit at least, I was like, well, look at that. Here that is. Well, look at that. Yeah. This guy said that. Well, look at that. And then I heard the words that they were using to try to describe it. I'm like, oh, I got a way easier way to say that. And it's not for lack of understanding those terms or what they mean. It's just simply you're just overcomplicating that. These aren't easy words that I use necessarily for everybody, but these are, if you're in this discussion, these are common words. If you're in this discussion at all,
somebody said about circuits, and let me just tell you something right now. I absolutely detest theoretical circuits. I do not like the way they're written. I do not like anything about them. If you're going to put something somewhere, put it there. Don't tell me how the theory works. I don't want to know. I just want to know exactly where to solder this thing and be done. That's just me in my head. It makes sense why they do it. It doesn't make any sense when I go to build it. That's all I got to say about that. They try to confuse you with all this stuff to make it sound complicated so that you can't build a circuit. And when it really comes down to it, you're soldering 5 points on it, and they're over there drilling this thing that looks like a racetrack. And I just hate it.
Yeah, I used to restore old straight razors back when I used to shave every so often. And, and when I say old, I mean 200 years old. I was really into it. I thought I was pretty good at it anyway. But there was a community for that. And I was part of a forum. This was back 15 years ago, at least at this point. So there wasn't this, but it was a forum, And what I always found to be hilarious, is these guys would try to make money honing, razors, sharpening them to perfect sharpness. And they would go on these forums to people just getting started and basically be like, and don't even bother trying to sharpen your own razor, send it out, have a professional do it. You're going to screw your razor up, not all that meets the eye, blah, blah, blah. I got to be real. I'm not saying it's easy, and it's definitely a talent, but they made it out to be some type of overly complicated situation that it just simply in no realm was. But yet you had these people that just bought razors, some of them bought them new rather than restoring them. So it's not like they have a base knowledge of this thing. They just have this thing that cost them $350 from Soligen, Germany or whatever. I like the Sheffield ones personally, but that's besides and they're like, well, I don't want to screw up my $350 razor. This guy's charging $15 to get it sharpened, and all I got to do is send it to him in the mail and he'll have it back to me within a week,
Wow.
So that's exactly what that circuit nonsense is, and I've heard it 100 times when I'm listening to your stuff, and I honestly, that's when I start talking about inappropriate things in the comments to people, although I'm still like following along, and it's yeah, that's the way that this is, and I couldn't disagree. I couldn't agree with you more in terms of like, yeah, the circuitry here. Like, there's certain things that, okay, well, no, this is just the way it is. It's simple. You put it together, boom, boom, boom. Let's not spend time on this. This works. On to what we're trying to do here, because
Yeah.
this isn't the problem. Where circuitry is interesting and understanding the circuitry is interesting, plays right back into what I said about the material science and compound, solid states. Because if you don't understand the working of the circuits, you can't build that into a solid state structural material that then serves its function analogously in that. So like, you have to know it and understand it, I guess. I don't really, because I don't really care. But if I was in that realm of trying to create that, then well, I would want to know all that. I wouldn't get hung up on it though, because there's only so much to know there. It does what it does.
Yeah.
Like, that's not where you're not looking for 0-point access from your circuit. All right, so move on.
You're just controlling the flow of energy. That's all you're doing. That's at its simplest. That's all you're doing. And if you know what you want out of it, it's not that hard to build.
I have to plug my phone in, Nathan, or else it's about to die. So
yeah, go for it. How you doing, Crypto? I see you in there. You haven't joined us yet.
I was just enjoying your guys' conversation. A lot I agree with, but while we wait, sorry, what's the straight dope's name?
Joe.
Yeah. Well, we're waiting for him to plug in his phone. I heard you earlier mention that you're arguing with some Russian fellow. He's saying that there's something different between it, and it triggered this memory of Russell Anderson on the last APEC that he was on, I believe. They're just a short clip of him specifically saying whatever the heck it something that until you guys make whatever adjustment it was, but he actually states what it is, that they'll never work or something. So I'm just wondering if that is potentially the key. I'm going to have to find the clip to get what
there's a frequency and a phase difference between the power here and the power in Russia.
Yeah, but he gives like the exact numbers of what like you're supposed to tune it to like be able to mimic it or copy it or something like that. Just an idea that might never know. But first I have to go back and find it and actually.
My total point was I'm changing the energy completely. So what it started out was it will not be when I go to put it in. Now, if I was running a straight circuit and I just wanted an average effect, absolutely that would be the case. But that's not what I'm doing. So when I break down the voltages, I break it down where you could put in the center of a coil, you can start your lighter and I can change the voltage. Just by putting it right in the center of the ether. I completely changed the game on what they're doing. I'm way past them.
Now, that intrigues me in the aspect of I want to put my little electrolysis reactor right in the middle of that and then manipulate and try to get that sweet spot for the hydrogen to decouple and pop off. And
yeah,
that's a very good idea right there.
Well, that's the difference in what I'm doing versus what they're doing. They haven't understood how voltage actually works. They use a circuit to think they're manipulating the voltage in the way they think it works, right? So they understand high voltage as, I don't want to say it, as simply coming through a coil. They don't understand how to manipulate the coil yet. They have no idea. They don't know why they're doing it. They just know the effect they get out of it. They have no understanding of why it's doing what it's doing. You know what I mean? So they can't use it properly.
I got you.
So
I'm just trying to apply what you've developed and apply it to what I'm doing and take it up a notch.
Oh, dude, I would exactly do that. That'd be amazing. You get your stuff to work faster. I love the beauty of your work and the fact that you're breaking down everything to a base element. And now you can just take it and rebuild it to what you know what I mean?
It's more than base element, and the whole key to the cold fusion, the hydrogen, the breaking down of matter and putting it back together again is being able to get that plasma ball, like the ball lightning or a plasma arc, going through the center of the electrolyte and electrodes reaction, because then you have the density and mass of like a heavy liquid as opposed to the gas, but you're getting that essential star in the jar supercavitation effects of the actual plasma state, ionized plasma, that then is reacting with that water, splitting it into the hydrogens and oxygens and the different isotopes of the hydrogen, also creating deuterium, tritium, as well as the atomic hydrogen. And then when you get the metals into the reactive crystalline state that Isaac Newton talks about, that they're figuring out the metamaterial of this red state, and that it's like you're able to get the metal into this red hydride state. So it's actually hydrogen, not heat, that's getting it into this state. That then you're able to use this plasma and ionized gas into transmutating the other elements around it that it touches, just like the plasmid reactor of Malcolm Bendel, as well as all of the work that Bob Greenier's done, the EVOs and whatnot. And that I've got to get, I really need to send samples to him, but that I'm getting 99% sure the exact same plasmid the yin yangs, the torids, the shapes on the actual sides of the metal, the electrodes, without having to have the actual ionized gas plasma arc, because I'm using such low voltage in my reactions. And half of the ones that I do, I have zero actual electrical input into them. I just have the different metals connected by wires to themselves, building little circuits within the saltwater jars, that it creates enough differential that it actually powers and creates hydrogen and creates their own balance of establishing cathodes and anodes out of the metals themselves. That it actually, lots of them I've had run and react for about a year before it like wears itself out. Of course, it's like a lot smaller production of hydrogen rate compared to when you're putting in the voltage. But it's the fact that just setting that up, and then what you were talking about, Nathan, with being able to pulse the energy and frequencies into that center of that area, that the way I would have it set up is that you'd be pulsing that into the water between the electrodes and where the reaction happens, and that you'd essentially, the goal would be to create the star in the jar effects without having to put the millions of volts in to create the plasma arc.
So let me ask you this. You know what a magnetron looks like? Why not make that into your jar where you have the magnet on the top and the bottom, and then you create the frequency chamber in there with the anode and cathode in there, and then you control the voltage going in there and how fast it's going to work, but it's constantly in spin as well. So you're getting the resonance in there and everything you want.
I absolutely love that.
Gamma radiation works better.
I just thought that's where you were going when you mentioned the microwave that day that we were looking at it. That's kind of what you thought.
Well, so with the microwaves, apparently if you just combine the two dried out ormuses together as a powder and then put it into a microwave, that the actual microwave energy is enough to react it where it fuses together and then turns it back into a new solid element, and sometimes like mineral combinations. Supposedly, heard lots of stories of it. Need to try it out.
Well, I'd love it.
Well, can I real quick? That's interesting because remember what I was saying before about crystal formation under presence of energy of the same. So if you have something that's producing microwave energy, crushing it up and putting it into a microwave, it's the microwave that's ultimately bringing it to the state where it could turn to, plasma reaction, so on, regain its freedom to recrystallize. And because the wave influx in the environment of where it's then recrystallizing would then be a constituent of the same.
100%, you were bang on with that.
So, yeah, that's, by the way, I came to that conclusion myself, which is very strange, which is why I meditate, because I ask questions.
Always question.
Always question.
Well,
Can I ask you, Bernie, by the way, I always like it when you're on, because your headspace, it tends to be very similar to mine as far as like, some of the things I like to figure out. Yeah, no, I always like watching you. What did you catch the early parts of what we discussed? Like, did you?
Absolutely, yes, sir. I was listening to all of it, and I don't think I disagreed with a single thing, and loved like everything. It's
Oh, that's awesome. See, I actually want somebody to correct me. Like, I know that's silly, but I feel I just want to know where I went wrong. I mean, if I didn't, cool, but like it's.
For sure,
I find benefit in being wrong.
Exactly. Just
here you go.
Someone else's perspective of their own discoveries, experiments, and testing, right?
Okay, check it out. Mix the ormus shape with a memory alloy. So we talked about the outside of a spaceship, okay? And I always think that there's a layer of this in there that crystallizes that you have to put on with this kind of ormus stuff that you're building. And then it crystallizes when you put in the energy. It stays in a wet, damp space until you put the energy to it, and then it forms the crystals into everything.
Absolutely. And the key is to do that right as it's drying and like forming into it, right?
Yeah. So you want to add the microwave energy in there and get it to expand and build. So doing our own little chemistry experiment here, but I think that's the way you have to do it.
Oh, absolutely.
I like that.
And that you have to also, at the same time that you're doing that, when the crystallization of this outer nano layer solidifies and happens, you have to have an electrical pulse or like small current going through it in the manner that you want the electrons to be flowing from your field, right? So it's like whatever field that you have or want to imprint on it, it's key to put that in right at the moment of your crystallization.
See the chart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You may have some quantum tunneling going on there as well as soon as it builds, which would just be amazing. So it may, in the end, produce a bit of electricity as it goes as well. It'd be an interesting aspect if it did.
So, by the way, charge state, in my theory of what I put together, and just being able to determine the polarity, configuration of crystalline, matter forming the crystalline structure. It actually happens, in my opinion, at the lowest level of pure energetic state. Under magnetism, and that's how you could actually determine whether whether something's a conductor or a dielectric, or what its magnetic properties are going to be, is depending on how you structure the magnetic influences during those the late phase energy crystallization, because of the polarity. So if you have something that's forming into matter from energy, as I kind of described before, at the molecular level, and it's building upon itself and building up into its larger constituent component, and it's done so in the presence of certain different types of either electric magnetic fields in certain configurations, will actually point the dipoles of what's being created in certain directions and influence its accumulation. So what I think is cool is if, like, the rock that I previously presented could be like artificially crystallized. Now, they figured out in a lab at MIT how to do it. I don't know how they did it, but they have the crystalline structure, which is actually what do you call it? It's the same star pattern. That's the crystalline structure of it. It allows for fluidity of the dipoles, and that makes it a quantum spin liquid. Okay, that's what
That
a
makes a
quantum
lot of
spin
sense.
liquid is.
It's my understanding of how it works. So one I guess I should pull up the
It's right.
periodic tables, and that I believe the crystallization of the different elements corresponds to where each element is on the harmonic level, and thus the density of the platonic shape of the crystallization and the number dimension of that element. Just geometry.
Yeah, it's if you want to know how something's going to crystallize, you could think of it from a cymatic perspective, because that is the integral native formation of those interacting localities of wavelengths. So if you
you trigger a phase change of solidification of the crystallization without having to put the energy into or the heat energy or electrical energy, and I guess the amperage. That part I not quite understand, but
the amp to the heat
energy to get a phase change up in a reaction, but instead putting that cymatic frequency and that resonant frequency, that if you nail that, you'll get the exact same phase change into that crystallization and next phase of matter is a key part of that.
By the way, Bernie, I'm making this crap up as I go along.
Aren't we all?
Yeah, right. This is welcome to the interesting place that is my head.
Yeah.
But it makes sense to me. And I'm following you too. I mean, it's all about locality, environment. I've been the whole entire point of this. It's all about putting first of all, pressure. Pressure is important because you need to be able to contain. It's about containment. Now, one interesting.
So think of what you just said right there. And earlier you were talking about how the bottom of the sea is the same pressure differential to like where we are like on sea level and in air compared to sea level air to space, right? And that in these reactions of electrolysis of water and the salt, that you have that contained pressure as if you have you're squeezing all that gas, all of that matter together, but you don't actually have to put that pressure in because you already have it in that H2O liquid that you're then breaking down into the fusion matter that you're then using to build and add to the other elements or atomic reaction mass.
So not only is that creation of matter, but how do you think life came about and why it came out of water? Because water is the matter phase in which is a sorter of heavier materials and lighter materials. It's the medium. It's also solvent. It becomes more solvent as pressure increases. When you're dealing with when you're dealing with geological formation, you deal with supersaturates that cannot occur at atmospheric pressure. That's why they say, well, diamonds, pressure, carbon, pressure, heat. Okay, well, that's a diamond. Talk about quartz, though, it's the same deal.
How the diamonds, the different actual crystals form on the electrodes and in these reactions is that when they have that plasma arc, right where that ball lightning ionized plasma gas comes off of the electrode, usually it'd be the cathode side where you have the hydrogen reactions coming off in the atomic hydrogen out of the water, that then one original atom of whether your carbon, your silica, whatever crystal that you're growing off of it, hits that plasma arc, and then you start just transmutating that atomic hydrogen into the carbon that turns into that diamond or the silica.
Yeah. Or that's dead on, and that's analogous. It's analogous to the ocean thing because the pressure in that situation. First of all, the containment's the plasma. The plasma and its ionic charge acts as containment, and then the pressure is coming from the frequency of the arc in that context. When you have containment and you have pressure, you have heat in that instance in the form of the arc, you can change the structure of the constituent element.
It's also that heat containment quality of the water and the salt water and how high it is, how well it contains it, the reaction. I don't know if you've ever seen the video I did with Jeremiah. It was Jeremiah's setup from a cold fusion electrolysis plasma arc reaction where the guy was transmutating hydrogen into helium, and that Jeremiah set it up and reproduced it at his lab about a year, maybe a year and a half, maybe even 2 now. But we have to do the next step of doing it, reproducing it second time, but more of a consistent reaction sort of thing, because his original setup, he was using the capacitors, just weren't able to keep the level of charge going of reaching the white plasma state that creates the transmutation, where it's like just orange, I think. That's the layer below. Anyways, point being, we were able to transmutate hydrogen into helium in
That's incredible
reactions.
That's all. I didn't see that. In fact, I mean, frankly, I mean, I read a lot and I listen to casts a lot, watch a lot of videos and stuff like that. But frankly, I just take the bits and pieces of it and then I make sense of it on my own. So like a lot of You know, like I wish I had seen more, and seen that, because that probably would have inspired like so much other trains. You know, it would have been another rabbit hole to go down, I suppose. But it's like, you know, uh, this isn't a matter of believing. This is just simply a matter of this is the way
I
it
will
is. Like,
show
you know,
you and everyone right now. And
yeah,
this is that to gotta get.
Rains.
This is the
Today
original
we're going to
video.
make something truly
These are my
special.
producers.
We're going to do something called cold fusion. Now, it's very controversial because cold fusion is said not to exist, or it is said not to be possible, or at least the experiment can't be replicated. Well, I'm going to at least prove one of those myths wrong. We're going to replicate the experiment. And this is how we're going to do it. We're going to take our trusty tube that we used last week, but different things are going to go on. Let me show you.
All right, here's the heart of our machine. We have 2 rods of tungsten carbide, one uninsulated, holding some stainless perf, one insulated with plastic coating, and these little porcelain insulators. You may recognize them. They are fuses. I took the end caps off, hollowed them out, slid them over our tungsten carbide rod for a little heat protection. I don't know if it's going to do much, but we have to do what we can because the process inside here is going to be very, very violent and hot. Now, you can see that this is just the top of the water filter. Here we're going to have our thermometer, our negative and positive connections. Yes, they're just tubes, but there are connections. So now, let's put this puppy together.
Okay.
Sorry, pause it there. In regards to you and Nathan's conversation earlier, with Nathan mentioning the oxygen capture and repulsion being a issue, it's when you design a hydrogen fuel reactor, it's key to know that the anode side is what produces your oxygen and the cathode side is what produces your hydrogen. So to where he has the 2 tungsten rods there, that you would design it to have 2 pipes going up to the top that collect that hydrogen and oxygen and then being tubed off into 2 different collection chambers or directly into your ignition. And that 1,000%, the biggest thing that why they have prevented hydrogen fuel from being implemented and the technology for the last 30 years, even though they keep saying it and teasing with it and whatnot, is because they are unable to develop the infrastructure for it to make sense to actually have hydrogen pumps that they can sell the hydrogen without everybody figuring out that it's a lot easier to just engineer turning that hydrogen into hydrogen from water right before the source of your engine, so you don't have to waste all the energy of transporting it, shipping it, storing it, having it in compressed, dangerous, explosive containers and all the rest of the BS, and be able to charge us for it, as opposed to everybody just using water as the fuel of your vehicle.
right. That's what they call an inconvenient truth. You know,
That's the real inconvenient truth right there.
Hey, look, I live in California. They find a way to tax everything. They still tax us for taking the lid out of gasoline, which it never came with. And they still tax us like, I think, an extra $1 more than every other state on fuel. So they find a way to make their money. They'll just put it in a pump and tell you it's different and tax you more.
anybody says that they're worried about efficiency and that they're looking to solve it hasn't actually looked at the problem at all. And they all have.
No, it's the
And
exact
they all
opposite.
have.
All
It's not right.
lies.
It's money,
it's
right?
designed to be the most inefficient system of possible, right? Like, it's absolutely insane when you actually start to understand energy and electricity and generating and all. Like, it's absolutely insane.
See, the biggest problem with it, okay, is something that that they ought to. It's actually the problem with our society as a whole and how it's run. And I mean, this is a whole other conversation, I suppose, but it all boils down, as always, all to the same thing. You know, we have this situation where, you know, they did trust busting back in the day, you know, when you were talking about a, you know, monopolization of a single industry to encourage competition for capitalism. And that's great. You know, like, I believe in capitalism, but what we have is not capitalism. You know,
It's crony capitalism. It's
well, right. See, I used to work for Berkshire Hathaway. Okay, I used to work for a Warren Buffett company. Okay, well, not for Berkshire, but for a Berkshire company. Okay,
gotcha.
And I mean, what do we really know about these companies? Like, well, you see the insurance companies, you see the fast food places, all this. You think, oh, well, I'm going to McDonald's. McDonald's got my money. I'm going to whatever. What you quickly realize is that no, these holding companies own all of these companies. And then you look at those companies' competitors, and then no matter what industry you look at, there's a holding company that holds stakes in every single industry. So including banks and including everything. So what does that mean? You know, what that means is that every dollar you earn from that company gets spent back at either that company or one of another couple. You know, it's like, I just opened up a business. Look at me. Okay, well, I opened up a restaurant. I'm a small business. Well, where'd your chicken come from? You can't cut. There's no such thing as cutting them out, and there's only a couple of them. That's it. That's really the answer, because there is no competition. It's all friendly stuff.
Self-sufficiency, and that is one of the big aims and goals of, you know, the free energy and anti-gravity and all of it, right? Is becoming self-sufficient and like one less off the grid.
Yeah, I listen. I couldn't agree more. But you know, where does that leave the people that have worked there? See, the problem with people like that is they don't like. There comes a certain point in time where you're not investing money anymore for money, because you have enough of that for you, everybody else that you need for forever and a day. So why are you doing it? Because you like it so much, or because you like moving the pieces?
It's
because you like moving the pieces.
This
That's it.
Corporate totalitarian elite dictatorship and debt slavery, right? It's insane.
You know what? I could go for a Star Trek society, to be honest with you. Learn everything, put me on a starship, man, let me go. You know what I mean? I don't mind doing the work. I don't, you know, all that's all cool. I can live with all of it. I don't care if there's any pay to it. Okay? I just want to be out there. That's it.
See, there was a reason why Moses was handed 10 commandments, and why those 10 commandments said nothing about any of the 100,000 laws that linger over you at any given time, and all the penalties that you're subject to. What did God hand to Moses? He said, don't steal from anybody, don't hurt anybody, you know. And
it's amazing, because I've said that my whole life. Like, if there was like just the 10, right? Oh, how about the 10 basic commandments? And then you list them off, and it's like that, you know, those are the most basic morals you can do. And it's like, don't kill, don't steal, don't rape, don't fuck your neighbor, don't lie, right? And like,
yeah.
And if you abide by only those simple things, society works absolutely flawlessly. Now, the funny thing about it is that even within the confines of that, there's tons of wiggle room. If you consent to this or that, then do as you may, as long as you're not affecting non-consenting parties. See, like, we've come to the point where everybody on the entire planet, except for the very, very select few, we're all non-consenting parties to, exist in something that ought to just simply be better, and it's all done because, what you don't logically approve of what I'm doing. You know what I mean? But how did I affect you? Didn't? Well, then what's it to you? And I these are the fruits of my labor. Okay, well, I gotta give a shekel to keep society moving so we could have roads to float over. Wouldn't that be a problem? Where's all the tax money going to go for the roads, right? That you can't drive on with your car that breaks your car because you're floating above the damn thing. Like, you can't have this sort of stuff because all of a sudden the money ain't coming in anymore. Well, it will be, except what's it for? What's it for?
Currently war, which is just absolutely insane and ridiculous. And what the fuck, right? Like, but let's get back to the science of trying to
the science of it. Not why we don't have the science to the science.
Oh, there you go.
So also earlier, when you're talking about separating the oxygen, want to show right here, this is a anode, and those are all big old oxygen bubbles completely just stuck to it. Not going up, just layering copper coil.
Nice.
That makes sense to me.
And then the self-arranging, it always goes into a spiral, and it's like,
hey, Bernie, can I ask you a question? It's hypothetical. In that situation where you have the bubbles riding the tube, wanting to be together but remaining separate, okay? You cap it off so it has nowhere to go. It creates pressure. It creates pressure in the system. It consolidates further into one homogeneous bubble. Maybe there's an outlier or two that's outside its reach. But now it's a bubble of a constituent material in a spiral of mess. Sounds like what we were talking about.
So inside of it, it's just a big blue and red goo until it you take the current off, and then it resolidifies and oxidizes, and a bunch of the metal falls off as like copper oxide, and the inner metal reforms from the goo. But it's about getting that right harmonic frequency in there at the moment that you have it in this state to then crystallize and transmutate, adding those two elements together, getting your new fusion.
This is exactly what I've been talking about. There's the experiment. Super cool.
Right? Like, I was listening to you, I was like, I have to come on and show this, because I literally know exactly what you are talking about and couldn't agree more, because that's what happens.
Yeah. I'm telling you, imagine that same experiment, except it's at the bottom of the ocean, so it's just under constant pressure where everything's shrinking and shrinking, and it's pressed on itself. And then all of a sudden it's like, but I can't be hydrogen anymore because now I'm so compressed that I'm going to have to fuse, and if you like, that's, like that, those are the conditions. Like that's it. If you take that and you put it under even more pressure, you start seeing even crazier things. But even under the same reaction, because by virtue of what it's doing, it would create its pressure itself. It would become a pressurized system if you just close it off. And you could
now this happens all on its own, the self-organization and the spinning spiral of monatomics and different exclusion zones and isotopes of water and hydrogen and the Ormus. But to put this right here into the center of what Nathan's doing in the gravifier fields, I believe, You know, crazy things will happen from that.
Yeah,
I think so.
I think we're all right on the same page with that. It's just like when we talk about building one of these ships, and we want to do it in a short amount of time, and with all of our different fields combining, it really makes it easy. This wouldn't be a
Exactly,
difficult
right? We're
task.
getting an acceleration.
Yeah.
So in this picture right here, this coil's in that red state I was talking about. And so is this aluminum, and then so is the armis that forms. And then the cloud here, there's zero electricity going into this jar. I have just separated this coil off from being an anode on a different reaction. And it's just non-stop bubbling of hydrogen. Like literally the water everywhere is just turning into hydrogen. It's quite wild when you get it into this state, but
That's awesome. That's like a cascading effect.
yeah, exactly. So
I'm sorry,
lots of times it'll just go into that, and then you just see all these just tiny glowing sparkling bubbles rising everywhere out of the water. Oh. Or just there. Anyways, back to do you mind if I finish showing that hydrogen to helium cold fusion?
Nice.
Now, we'll put some water in our little tank. Yes, you guessed it. It's going to be distilled water, not tap water, not spring water. It has to be distilled. So we're going to pour that in. Okay, we don't want to fill it up all the way. Just halfway would be fine. Now we're going to put our anode and cathode array back inside. And that's basically how it sits. Now, we still have to put in our electrolyte, which is KOH. But first, I'm going to talk about the process a little more. Now, what happens in this chamber, it's going to make a plasma arc. It's also going to make hydrogen. What's going to happen when the plasma arc hits the hydrogen? You guessed it. It's going to burn the hydrogen. That's how this process works. The plasma arc and the current make hydrogen and burn hydrogen at the same time. That's why some people say that we can make over unity by using a little energy to excite the hydrogen to make more energy. This is what the big controversy is all about. I don't really care about the controversy. I just care that there is a process going on here, and we're going to get to experience it. Okay. Now we're going to add some KOH. Again, nasty stuff. We're going to put on some safety gear. My trusty yellow glasses and some nice gloves. Again, I cannot stress safety. KOH, again, was used for drain cleaner. It's nasty stuff. You do not want it on your skin, and especially you do not want it in your eyes. So we have to be very careful with this stuff, okay?
Darn right.
All right, start adding the KOH. Now I'm going to put in a little at a time so we don't put in too much. Again, if we get too much current flowing, the experiment's not going to work. If we don't get enough current flowing, the experiment's not going to work. So what we're going to do is we're going to put in a little right now, and we're going to close it up, and then we're going to play with it. And we're going to find out at what point we have the right current flow. Yeah, it's a little experimental, but, you know, that's science. So we're going to put in a little more. And now we're going to...
Bernie, can you pause there for a second? I have a question. Maybe you know the answer to.
Put it back into...
Yeah. So,
Yes, sir.
like, obviously, like, he's playing around, you know, with the current that he's putting in just to kind of hit that sweet spot. Now, I know why not too much, and I know why too little. But in this particular reaction, do you have any idea, you know, what is the determining factor of that sweet spot?
getting the plasma arc into the white plasma, as I guess is what Jeremiah was saying was key. So it's like doing it in this method, I guess. Whatever
So it's
voltage
like
it
if
takes
you
to do that.
is there like based on like based on the periodic table and stuff, are there like, my understanding is there's certain harmonics
Exactly.
and
The
frequencies
resonant
that
frequency.
resonant frequency, the right native resonant frequency of
Yeah, you put that harmonic in, and then that's where you'd be able to trigger it without having to put the voltage electrical energy in.
okay.
Get it.
But is there some great grand mystery into figuring out what the native resonant frequencies are of any constituent element in something?
The Hutchinsons have a method of capturing it and figuring it out, and then the plasmid unification model, I believe,
Plasmoid
also,
unification model, whatever.
is starting to figure it out, and I really gotta send Sheila on it. Sheila, hold on.
See, I've seen the plasmid
Sheila
unification model. I just haven't seen that where the frequencies are, on it.
So it's Sheila Rahman's work that she's the one figuring it out, and I need to email her back to confirm. I scared her off, I think, because we were talking. She was gonna come on. I sent her some stuff that she asked for, and I like made a joke right at the end. I'm like, hopefully they don't kill us for developing this. And then I haven't heard anything back. I was like, oh
No.
Yeah.
So gotta
listen, when people have a bigger platform, I think they become a little bit more leery. I mean, aside from hearing like Malcolm Bendel speak, and how he goes on, which is interesting to me, but I could understand from other perspectives how that could be very unrelatable. I think that's why he like had Jordan kind of like rein it in and be that more palatable personality for the masses. So yeah, I can understand that when the exposure comes, that it becomes it becomes more challenging to face those facts.
I was specifically referring in that statement to applying her coherent geometric frequency science and technology directly into the electrolysis plasma hydrogen reactions that I'm working on here and we're talking about, and that it's like that's just the key of once you get that right geometric frequency, resonant frequency in, that you're then just playing a sound into the water, and from there you get the hydrogen and oxygen breaking up with so little energy.
Yeah. See, I think that the skepticism in discussing these things, for what it's worth, if you're discussing it in technical terms and not showing anything, that it's like, oh, look at what I did or whatever, then it just is what it is, because most people aren't going to want to even watch a 4-hour video of just a couple guys going back and forth on like something that I'm like, look, guys, I simplified it, and then I'm using words that are just not in their vernacular.
Oh yeah.
But
usually re-listen to all of these like at least once or twice, because there's so much, and editing helps because it gives me a reason. And here's a short video of that picture I was showing, and you can see all the ridiculous bubbles close to the top coming up, and you see them coming up from the bottom too. Just the lighting's not as good for it, but there you go. Those are the big ones, and then the filminess is the atomic hydrogen, and it's literally the smallest bubbles you ever see, and the camera doesn't really capture them too well. Just comes out fuzzy. But yeah, there's a jar with all the water, all the hydrogen coming up, no electricity going in.
Nice.
That might also have to do with what Bendel was talking about when there's plasmoid creation, craters it out, holds the charge. So there's a bit of an after effect as far as charge discharge in the local environment.
Absolutely. And it's that I connected the so the aluminum here that's bubbling up on this side was copper and aluminum. It was the cathode of the reaction that I had plugged in, and then the red state coil was the anode. I plugged them in with 5 volts into like a way bigger reactor for a couple of days. Then I disconnected it, put it into the small saltwater jar, and it did this crazy reaction nonstop for like 3 days until it worked itself out. But
Did you say there's salt in there?
yes,
You created a battery.
exactly. That's what these are. They're batteries.
Yeah, because it's an anode and a cathode, but they're 2 different types. So it's not a capacitor, it's a battery because of the salt water. It's saltwater battery.
You
Nice.
got it. So I'm literally
Mhm.
building saltwater batteries and circuits, because then what I
Nice.
do is I'll connect these things to each other and other metals and things with 2 wires each to them, and that each of these coils have like 2 ends minimum coming out from them, and create circuits out of the electro batteries.
No different than the rocks that they just found at the bottom of the ocean. They produce oxygen.
Okay, hold on.
Yeah.
Bedini talked about taking the battery, okay, and putting those short bursts of energy in it, right? And then it would clean the anode and cathode off. I'm always kind of curious when you do something like this and you've had it in water for a while, if you hit it with that same potential, would it cause a massive stir in there and drop off of like all the different stuff that's on there?
So there's the sulfication that the alchemists call, and it's when you put in, it's either the double negative or the double positive. I forget. I gotta do it again. But everything simultaneously turns yellow in the reaction, and
Nice.
all like what the alchemists call calcification, but basically all the different nano coating isotopes and whatnot that build onto the cathode side fall off instantly, and you got the pure metal back on, just like we were
Nice.
discussing.
Hey Bernie, what do you think of what I was talking about before about running 2 scalar fields on and through a piece of stressed quartz, and then directing it into a plasma field? What do you feel about that?
I want to see that and try that myself. Absolutely. Like, man, crystals. I think they're like essentially like a higher state of plasma, I guess, is a more coherent plasma state potentially.
Okay.
So
But
what is that right there? Was that a crystal or was that just glass?
yeah, no, that was an amethyst that I had in there, seeing if there was any reaction from having them in, but didn't seem to really. I need higher voltages with that stuff. But yeah. Sorry, let's finally finish that one part so we can all see hydrogen turn to helium.
Understand. Okay. Okay. So we have our transformer hooked up. We have our canister in place. We have our anode and cathode and our negative and positive hooked up. And also here, this little stainless tube is a thermometer, which is hooked up here so we can monitor our temperature. This is where the experiment's going to happen, is the temperature. Now, let's fire it up. Now we've plugged in our variac. Oops, I forgot to tell you what a variac is. This is a really big volume control, like on your stereo, except it controls current in volts. It regulates how much current flows through it. Like, let's say we wanted to limit the current that goes to our transformer. Well, we only turn the variac up to 10%. Now, as you can see on our gauges already, we're registering some current and some voltage. Now, we have to warm this up slowly. You can also see that we're bubbling here inside the reaction chamber. That is hydrogen being made. Now, because it's high current and not low current, we have less volume of hydrogen, but more current through the water, which heats up the water. If you watch closely, you'll see this thermometer click up, and it'll heat the water slowly. And we have to heat the water slowly for the next 10 or 15 minutes till we get it to 100 degrees before we can kick on full volume. If I was to turn on the power full right now with the variac, you'd see the reaction, but only for a short bit. It would pop the breaker either on the variac or the transformer or the breaker on the cell. One of them would go. That's why we have to heat the water to the right temperature to give it the right resistance to make this experiment work. So, we're making a little hydrogen. We're up the temperature. You notice our voltage is relatively low. Our amperage has dropped down. Now, I'm going to go ahead and give it some more power. You can see on our what's up meter, we're using 92 to 94 watts of power. But I'm going to turn it up. So now we're using a little more power. Our amperage is 2.5. Our volts is at 50. We're bubbling down there, nothing special. Now, we are at 107 degrees. Now we're going to let her have it.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, check that
Notice
out.
we're at 250 volts. Our amperage is going anywhere from 3 to 2. And that's the fusion process that supposedly is impossible.
Look at that baby cook.
It's 182
Nice.
Fahrenheit. That's warm. See, we're about a 1 3/4 to 2 amps fluctuating. 260 volts. And the temperature is going up slowly. Steam is starting to come out. We're steaming the water in only a few seconds of action. And it sounds cool too. Here, get a closer sound of that.
And so I'm pausing it right here to point out one key part in Jeremiah's replication that he did and ran live on a stream that we did a couple years ago, reproducing this, that you see that it's sometimes bursting orange plasma, and then the other times it's bursting the bright white, and that you have to have it in that bright white state that it gets the reaction that actually fuses the two hydrogens into the helium.
Now that should occur. That should occur in a pulse, if I'm not mistaken. So like there would be a fluctuation. It should be like kind of like that's the movement of the reaction. Is like a pulse.
Yes, sir. The collapse and explode, right?
Yeah.
Forming concrete. Yeah.
Kind of sounds like a Ferrari underwater, huh? That's cool.
How about that for a kettle in the morning?
That's cool. He's using AC for this, right?
I believe so, right? Got the variac going in.
No, look at the what's up meter fluctuating.
Basically acting like a welding rod.
That was the first thing that came to mind.
Yeah.
I think we might be losing an insulator.
It's intermittent because it's an AC. The pulse is on and off.
That makes sense.
And you wonder why they
Okay, that's
have
exciting.
Oh, that
wonder why they have you welding with inert gas.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
All
like
right,
it's
our
getting
thermometer is
boiling now.
officially not happy. And we're producing steam here, kids.
I'm waiting for like a microwave chime when
All
it's
right.
done.
And there it is. It works. We're done.
just like that.
Building your online business?
That's awesome.
Just
That's
like
so
that.
cool.
She did.
I love voltages.
So got to reproduce that one again, develop that more, and actually capture the gas coming off of it, and then send it in to actually verify that it's got helium mixed in, and then boom, confirmed actual transmutation, cold fusion.
Nice. I wonder if you had like a DC pulse, but then intermittent to each other. So it would be like two ZVSs going off at once. So one would go and then the other would go. So you get more white, less yellow.
I think you are bang on with that, and that's the key part of building the second generation of it. To get that full, to get the DC. Do not break in the dipole, as Tom Bearden always says. That's the key to the over unity reaction part. And when Jeremiah reproduced it, he was like shocked at how much heat started coming out compared to the actual energy that he was putting in, and like was almost instantaneously like shocked, convinced that like right there he had verifiable like well over unity reaction going on. Gotta find that video and bring that up actually.
Well, there's going to be a ton of heat. I mean, you're basically throwing electricity in the water. Yeah. There's a ton of heat going on there.
Well, and the plasma arc, right? It's like how hot does that the ionized arc like get, right? Because the star in the jar cavitation, it's like a couple thousand at least, I think, not more.
Yeah, I don't know what the temperature of that was, and I kind of always wondered that myself.
Ionized gas, the plasma itself, not the water that I'm speaking of at that technology or temperature.
Right. Well, the temperature of the plasma where the transmutation would take place is at like the smallest imaginable like little point on that electrode. You know, it's so whatever visible wasted, as you know, we would call it, right? Plasma is visual there. Now, obviously, it'll put off some type of visual indicator, maybe as to what it's transmuting because of the composition, which is why the stars are different colors, right? You know, sometimes you have red stars. You know that they're later in their fusion phases because they're no longer transmuting helium anymore. Now hydrogen anymore. Now they're transmuting helium or heavier elements. You know, so obviously you would expect to see that color differential, that color shift. But the spot where the reaction is actually taking place is the zero. It's that exact 0 point at the end, you know, where that highest temperature is. Like, I don't even know necessarily that it would be measurable, you know?
Oh, absolutely. It's the EVO, right? It's the energy breaking down from the plasma into the liquid and solid matter.
Yeah. But just because of the environment that it's contained within, like though the environment's certainly not reaching that, and the plasma bubble is forming its own gas atmosphere, that could be very hot, but it's obviously not blowing off of it so much so that it's encapsulating the entire reaction. I mean, like from a visual standpoint, it is in fact encapsulating the entire reaction with a gas shield.
So I have a question on this chart. He drew it so it's bigger at the bottom and smaller at the top. So when you go to transmutate something, don't you have to add an element to whatever you're doing to get it to be that element lower?
And so that's where the extra hydrogen atoms, the extra oxygen atoms, as well as the salts, whatever elements you're using as the electrolyte or the salt, the crystal, the opposite side of the metal, right? Because that's another huge part of Walter Russell's charts and alchemy, especially ancient alchemy, is you have your salt and you have your metal, and that you combine them, and with fusion, cold fusion, the balance of both, and the fact that in this alchemy, in this electrochemistry, cold fusion of the metals, of the electrolysis, you have your hydrogen, you have your salt, and then you have whatever elements that you are using as your electrodes, your cathode and your anode. And that when you have, say, the cathode of like gold, because you want to make gold, and then your anode, you have tungsten, because it's just one atomic mass below gold as your anode, and then you get that tungsten into that transmutational state, and then he is then putting in that gold resonant frequency, the cymatic harmonic frequency geometry into that water that triggers the crystalline formation reaction. Then it takes the single hydrogens off of it, bonding into that metal, fusing it, and apparently transmutating gold, right?
Hey, I want to run a funny parallel on you, right? You think about horoscopes, okay, and star and astral position at time of conception and birth, okay. Now you apply the fundamentals of everything that we've been talking about localities, interactive localities, and different forces at times of accumulation and growth. Okay, there's certain ways that your molecular structure, ultimately forms based on these different positionings, of the external localities on, at your time of crystallization, so to speak. Yeah, it's like it's crazy because it's such a complicated thing, but like at the end of the day, it's super fundamental. When you have plasmas, you're talking about negative ions, and then you're talking about hydrogen with technically one valence electron. So anything that you create in that atmosphere of free ions and electrons of the most basic element being ripped out of the water, whatever additional things that you're putting in there, the hydrogen is providing in that atmosphere by virtue of its itself, the ability for it to be changed. That's the environment in which it could be changed. Now, what it changes into is more like what Bernie was saying, that's where the frequencies and the ultimate resonance of the area of the formation is going to be a major determining factor in that, just as much so as the chemical components because the components are already there. It's a matter of how they crystallize and restructure to determine the element outcome.
So a key part of what you're talking about and putting it all together is that it's like salt water is able to create all like solid matter essentially throughout, and that like the oceans, right? Like ocean can produce it all, and that there's the saturation and super saturation, and that there's water is able to dissolve all the solid metal elements and salts and then take it in. How? But somehow it does. And then spit it out. And when it spits it out, it's crystallized, right? Because it literally crystallizes. Anyone, if you ever made rock candy, right? Like you boil water, put sugar in, then put a stick in, let it cool, and as it cools, it saturates some of the sugar out because it's oversaturated, and then it forms into giant crystals, and that you get crystallization from elements reforming out of water.
So I did that one time because the crazy rock that I had was gone, but I had small little tiny dust of it more or less left. So I put them in solution and then saved the biggest piece for a seed, and ultimately created some like Rochelle salts that
Have you seen
you know,
Jeremiah and liminals with that? Oh my,
Yeah.
I gotta bring that up.
Yeah, so I tried to get those fragments to kind of impose their attributes into the newly forming crystal structure. It didn't not work. It didn't not work. It just like, again, it wasn't as apparent. It was just more apparent than the fragments. So that brought into question whether I had actually imposed any of those attributes into the newly forming crystalline structure, or whether, just the component of it being in there in larger form and in proximity to other, known reactive mineral fragments in there was enough for it to create that larger effect. So it's one or the other, but I wonder if it had an impact on the structures, like the structure of the crystal.
Oh, definitely did. And sorry, I'm just going through my videos trying to find the video of Jeremiah and Liminal doing exactly the same thing that you're describing yourself doing there, but getting some pretty impressive results with
Awesome.
exactly that.
By the way, I got to wrap it up shortly, so I'm gonna watch this and then I'm gonna tip my hat.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's almost been 5 hours.
It is a long one.
It's just somehow always turns
I could
out
go all
that way.
day, but I think other people depend on me.
Yeah,
Exactly. Still have lively duties and responsibilities that need to be taken care of course.
Yeah. Hey, all right. Spin on the spiral and still be a human.
God. Can never find it when you need it.
kind of like the rest of us. I don't have everything perfectly cataloged on my computer, so it's like hard to find everything.
I know, right? Like, oh God, gotta like somehow set aside a month straight to organize the videos.
I need to find a way to make enough money to have somebody else do all that. Well,
Right?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. One day, hopefully.
Yeah.
Until that day, wait. Thank you for waiting patiently while we go through. and
By the way,
try
for
to-
anybody that wants it, maybe I could put the general idea of the principles that led to all of this discussion today. I could put that in the chat. Too long.
Yes, please.
Also, somebody asked if you had a YouTube page or you were planning to do one.
I was thinking about it, and I was actually talking to another viewer about maybe getting together. That way, it's just not me talking. I mean, I hate talking too much, and I talk too much. So it's nice to split the difference sometimes.
But I feel you. You never talk too much.
I'm always the one asking all the questions. That's what happens.
Exactly. You can never ask too many questions. That's well worded.
I have too many to bother anybody else with it. I poke Nathan every so often. I'm like, hey man, I got a question. It's like I know he's so busy, and it's like, with all he's doing.
It's funny because I leave my computer on in the middle of working on everything over here on the desk or over there, and my phone pings every few seconds. So there's always something going on.
Yeah, I know, man. That's just the way. Please, if it was the
Really
sound of a text message and not a messenger, I wouldn't. I'd just be lost too.
Yeah, you know what? As a matter
Oh
of
my
fact,
god, I said he.
did you find it?
No, I'm just getting to 1 year in, and then I realized I said it's at least a year, maybe two, and I'm like, okay, still got a bit to go.
So I got something to share while you're looking for that.
Yes,
We
please.
were. Oh man, if I can get my screen right. There it is. Okay. So this right here is the new frequency pattern of the ZVS that Sean's building. And it's got way more energy than the last one did. So we just were using stock ones off the shelf. Now he's building his own. And he went from 6 of these MOSFETs, and I believe he's back down to 2, but he changed all the resistors and everything. The guy's just out of this world smart on this stuff. But it's got a massive ring to it. So let me see if right there's the board that he's using now. So it's a bit different than what we're normally looking at. So, but it's really cool. And then hold on, I'll pull it up. And then he just printed this off. So he's about to build this toroid structure and make it into a Tesla coil right here. So this is his ring right here. You notice it goes off the chart. He is getting so much more energy out of this. It's almost like double what he did last time out of his normal Tesla coil. So I wanted to show that. He's been busy at work, man. The guy's just out of this world smart on this stuff. So I just thought I'd share that with you guys.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
Yeah. Well,
yeah, look at those spikes.
Yeah. That's just not normal.
But that's the key to a lot of what we were talking about. Is Pi has said it, like he said, it's these spikes amongst the frequent. So when you have this more stable constant frequency and it spikes, that's where the magic happens.
Yeah.
And direction and containment of it. It's all on point. It's all happening. This is the concept to reality right on the screen. It's a,
well, we continuously do it, that's for sure. So
all right, Village Idiot is out.
It is. I love
every
it.
last one of us knows different things about everything, so it's good when we all come together.
Yeah, man. Well, I'll catch you soon on the next one. Have me back anytime you'd like. I'm always happy to listen and hang out.
Right on, Joe. Thank you very much for showing up today. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me as always, and blessed. Thank you very much.
Pleasure, Joe.
Yeah, Bernie. Take care, man.
Enjoyed every minute of that, and much love, guys.
Yeah, I'm about done for the day. You all good, buddy?
I feel you. We'll see you again soon.
All right, guys. Thank you very much for showing up and being in the chat and hanging out with us. I've had a great time. Thank you, Bernie.